Chapter 1, The Spotlight. It was supposed to be a team presentation. But there was only one person on stage. Bryce Langford, Director of Strategy, standing under the soft glow of the LED panel like he'd personally discovered electricity. Button blazer, fake humility, hands folded just right. None of this would have been possible without collaboration, he said, smiling at the VPs lined up along the back wall. But I knew if we aligned the vision early and leaned into risk, we could hit targets most teams wouldn't dare attempt. Lies, polished to a shine. The deck on screen? I built it. The prototype he was demoing? My code. My sequence. My architecture. But there wasn't a single mention of my name. Not even in the thank you slide. I stood in the back row, just another face in the crowd, watching my own work float across the screen like a ghost story no one could prove. Tasha was beside me, our desks weren't close, but she knew. She leaned slightly, just enough for me to hear. Didn't you write that demo module? I didn't answer. She already knew. Bryce clicked to the final slide, 3 company logos and the word delivered in bold font. The room applauded. The VP of Operations clapped him on the shoulder afterward. You keep this up, Langford, we're going to have to put you on the acquisition team. Bryce smiled like it was already done. Just trying to build something meaningful. He didn't look my way. Not once. Which was smart. Because if he had, he would have seen it. That flicker in my eyes. The one that always comes right before the lights go out. Chapter 2, Team Effort. It started with a blank slide deck and 3 empty coffee cups. I'd been working on the new client solution for 2 weeks straight, logging out well past midnight, sketching workflows on the back of receipts, building sandbox models in test environments just to keep the data clean. Bryce? He showed up once. Asked for a high-level summary, nodded through my explanation, then told me to make sure it pops visually. Whatever that meant. I built the strategy from the ground up, scoped the project, predicted the pain points, created a pilot phase, and wrote the contingency protocols. I even wrote the onboarding script. Word for word. The night before the pitch, I sent him the finished slides. He responded 2 hours later. Thanks, Jordan. Cleaned it up for executive polish. See you in the morning. I should have known. I opened the version he uploaded to the shared drive. The structure was the same. The flow, untouched. But my speaker notes? Gone. Replaced with generic buzzwords and quotes from business books Bryce had probably never read. He'd even changed the cover slide. Strategic rollout plan, prepared by B. Langford. That was it. My name wasn't listed. Not even in the appendix. I didn't say anything. Not then. Not out loud. I'd spent too many years in places like this to expect fairness. It was always we in private and me in the room. Especially when the real work couldn't be seen from a podium. After the presentation, Bryce stopped by my desk. Good stuff today, he said, smiling like he meant it. You're really growing into someone I can trust. Thanks, I said. I didn't mean it. And neither did he. What he meant was, I'm going to keep using your work until it stops making me look good. What I meant was, I just started documenting everything. Because if this was a team effort, I was done playing for his side. Chapter 3, Shrinking Credits. The internal newsletter went out 2 days later. Project Acceleration, Director Langford leads the charge. I clicked it open like I was peeling off a scab. There it was, Bryce's photo at the top, sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed in that overly staged candid leadership shot. The article quoted him directly. By trusting my gut and aligning cross-functional input, we delivered an aggressive rollout ahead of schedule. I'm proud of the effort my team put in under my guidance. Under his guidance. They spelled my name wrong in the footnote. Jordan. With an O. Not that anyone would have noticed, The mention was buried beneath a paragraph about Bryce's visionary execution style. By lunchtime, the post had been reshared by 3 VPs and liked by the CEO. Someone in HR even updated his internal profile to reflect strategic lead on innovation rollout. Bryce didn't send me the link. Tasha did. She dropped it in Slack with a single message. "You good?" I stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute before typing. "Always." But I wasn't. It wasn't just the credit he stole, it was the narrative. The version of events that would now be retold at every performance review, every annual summit, every future hiring round. This is how people get promoted. Not by doing the work, but by editing the story. The worst part? I knew how this would play out. HR would talk about optics. Leadership would say, "It's all one team." And if I pushed too hard, I'd be labeled difficult, ungrateful, hard to manage. That's how they win. But not this time. This time, I'd let him keep the spotlight. Because while he was busy polishing his own reflection, I was drawing the exit map. One dotted line at a time. Chapter 4, One-on-One. He called it a check-in. I called it a test. Bryce booked it on a Friday, right before close, the kind of time slot meant to make you sweat all weekend. I didn't. I already knew what was coming. The glass-walled conference room felt smaller than usual. He was already seated, sipping some overpriced bottled tea he'd started buying ever since the execs started noticing him. "Jordan," he said, all smiles, gesturing to the chair across from him like we were equals. "Appreciate you making the time. You scheduled it." He gave a soft laugh, the kind you use when you're trying to seem harmless right before delivering a warning. "Look," he said, leaning forward, "I know you've been putting in a lot of hours. Heavy lift on that last project." "Yeah," I said. "I noticed you noticed." He tilted his head, still performing casual. "I just want to make sure we're aligned. Sometimes people can get a little territorial about recognition. But the truth is, leadership's about proximity to outcomes. The higher up you are, the more you absorb." "Absorb?" I asked. "It's not personal. That's just how systems work. You're not being erased. You're being positioned." "Positioned? Like a pawn?" I studied him for a long second. Not to intimidate, just to see how far the delusion went. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You took my strategy, stripped out my notes, presented it under your name, and now you're telling me I should be grateful because I was near it?" He didn't blink. "You're not the first smart person I've worked with, Jordan. But if you want to grow, you have to learn when to step aside and let someone else open the door." I almost laughed. Because what he didn't realize, what he never could realize, was that I wasn't standing in front of the door anymore. I'd already found another one. I stood up. Calm. Professional. "Thanks for the advice," I said. "I'll position myself accordingly." And I did. Just not where he expected. Chapter 5, The Turning Point. The next project was supposed to be a reset. New client. Different vertical. Aggressive timeline. The kind of challenge that forced people to tighten up and collaborate. Instead, Bryce treated it like an audition. He opened the kickoff call with a personal story about risk tolerance frameworks and a half-baked metaphor involving Ferraris and market velocity. Everyone smiled and nodded, but you could feel it, the disconnect. Especially the client. They came to us for solutions. Structure. Not storytelling. When the call ended, Bryce clapped me on the back like we were buddies. "Solid vibe, right?" he said. "Just need you to fill in the delivery side. High-level structure. Strategy stuff." Strategy stuff. He meant, do the actual work. Again. I nodded. Got it. And I did. But not like before. This time, I kept every original draft in a private vault. I screen recorded edits. I saved version history with hash signatures. I documented every time I was left off a meeting invite and every email where Bryce referred to my work as executive-ready collateral he'd been nurturing. Nurturing? As if my work were a pet project he'd grown from scratch. I knew the pattern now. He'd lurk until the risk was gone, then swoop in, reword my sentences, throw in a buzz phrase or two, and present the deck as his own, with a fresh blazer and that same plastic smile. And the worst part? He always got away with it. But not this time. Because I wasn't just building a proposal anymore, I was building a trail. I started looping in Tasha when I had questions. Not because she had the answers, but because she saw everything. And I wanted a witness. I thought you already shared that with Bryce, she said one afternoon, scanning a doc I forwarded her directly. I did, I said. Just not this version. She didn't ask. She didn't have to. She knew exactly what I was doing. That's when it clicked. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. Let him keep the spotlight. Let him take the next big meeting. Let him stand on the stage and wave to the executives like a conquering hero. Because when it all fell apart, I wanted him standing alone. Chapter 6, Back Channel. Tasha wasn't a gossip. She was smarter than that. Which is why, when she dropped her voice at lunch and said, "You didn't hear this from me," I actually listened. We were sitting outside near the loading dock, the only place in the building that didn't feel like it had eyes. She picked at her salad while pretending not to watch me too closely. "Word is," she said, "Bryce pitched your last project to the CFO like it was a solo effort. Even told them he stayed up nights building the framework from scratch." I blinked. "The one with the 3-phase rollout?" "Yep. Used your exact diagrams. But stripped your name." I didn't even feel angry. Not anymore. Just cold. "Why tell me now?" I asked. She looked me in the eye. "Because people are starting to notice. Apparently, someone in finance flagged inconsistencies in his documentation. Engineering started pushing back on timelines he promised without consulting them. And someone from IT quietly reached out to Tasha to ask if I was still the point of contact on the current project, not because of politics, but because their updates kept stalling in Bryce's inbox. He wasn't just stealing credit anymore. He was bottlenecking it. And people were starting to connect the dots. "He's playing with borrowed time," Tasha said. "Thing is, he doesn't know the clock's already ticking." I nodded, not because I needed the warning, but because I'd already started the countdown. That night, I went home and organized everything, every draft, every export, every revision log and meeting note. I backed it up to 3 drives, labeled each copy by date, and dropped one in a private folder marked simply, Langford_Fallout. Because when the curtain finally dropped, I wanted the receipts ready. And the audience already watching. Chapter 7, Final Straw. It wasn't the theft. It wasn't the lies, the shrinking credit, or the slow bleed of visibility. It was the shrug. That lazy, dismissive shoulder roll he gave when the client called him out on my work. We were on a joint call with a major client who had finally flagged an error in the project proposal. Not a huge one, a versioning conflict in the delivery scope. A fixable issue, if you understood the framework. Which Bryce didn't. He stumbled through a vague answer, mumbled something about intentional phase iteration, then turned to me with that same old line. "Jordan, why don't you walk them through your section?" My section? The one I hadn't touched in 2 weeks, because Bryce had insisted on streamlining communications and made himself the sole contact for approvals. I did it anyway. Fixed it mid-call. Talked them through the logic. By the time we hung up, they were reassured. Bryce leaned back, grinning like he'd personally saved the deal. "Nice recovery," he said, walking past my desk. "Teamwork wins again." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because if I opened my mouth right then, I wasn't sure what would come out. That was the moment I knew. Not thought. Not suspected. Knew. I was done. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I finally realized he wasn't going to stop. Not until he burned through every ounce of my work, my name, my credibility. So I let him. Smiled. Said, "Got it, boss," and went right back to my desk. And I started pulling pieces away. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Just one protocol at a time. One access pass. One unshared password. He had built nothing. And I was about to show him what happened. When the person holding the foundation quietly steps aside. Chapter 8, The Removal Plan. I didn't quit. Not yet. First, I made myself disappear. Internally, I was still present, responding to messages, showing up to meetings, hitting deadlines. Outwardly, nothing changed. But behind the scenes? I was stripping him for parts. I started by pulling my documentation from shared folders. Not all at once, just a few versioning conflicts here and there. A dashboard removed. A tracker archived. Every time I touched a file, I created a mirror copy offline. Timestamped. Tidy. Mine. Next, I cleaned up my inbox. Deleted threads that no longer served me. Archived ones I might need later. Starred every email where Bryce thanked me for running point or taking lead, just enough to trace a pattern. Then I transferred knowledge. Quietly. Strategically. I pinged the junior analysts I trusted and walked them through key systems. Gave them tools. Templates. Left no gaps. When I left, the collapse wouldn't be total, just targeted. Bryce would assume he could step in and handle it. That's the point. Because he couldn't. Not really. He didn't know which dependencies mattered. Which files auto-synced and which ones were manually maintained. He didn't even know where the client audit logs lived. I'd caught him Googling it once, then blamed the intern when it went sideways. I started saying less in meetings. Asking fewer questions. Letting him fill the space. And he did. God, he did. He got louder. Bolder. Started quoting metrics he didn't understand. Promised faster rollouts. Gave exec status updates that weren't just wrong, they were dangerous. I kept a straight face. I let it all pile up. Because people like Bryce don't self-destruct. They perform until the foundation slips. And when it does, they fall fast. Chapter 9, Vanishing Point. I submitted my resignation on a Wednesday morning. Not because it was symbolic. Because that was the day he paid the least attention. I crafted the email the night before. Short. Precise. No adjectives. No gratitude fluff or motivational quotes. Subject, resignation notice. Effective, 2 weeks from today. I will ensure all current responsibilities are transitioned appropriately. Jordan Ellis. I read it twice before hitting send. And then, I breathed. It was the first time in months I'd exhaled without feeling like I owed someone an apology for existing. 10 minutes later, I saw Bryce's name flash across my phone. Then again. Then Slack. Then he appeared at my desk like I'd just canceled Christmas. Jordan, hey, did you send this by mistake? I didn't look up right away. I was finishing a line of code I wouldn't be around to debug. When I finally met his eyes, I said, nope. You're serious? As a heart attack. He blinked a few times, processing. His mouth opened, closed, then reopened with the rehearsed, let's not be impulsive. You've been under pressure. We all have. I tilted my head slightly. Is that what this is? He smiled. One of those tight, forced smiles that doesn't reach the eyes. Come on, man. I've been advocating for you. You're next in line for senior lead. That's funny, I said, clicking save on my final repo update. You told Carla you wrote the deployment framework. He hesitated. I said I structured the delivery model, he muttered. I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. You said I wasn't ready to lead. Those were your exact words. His face shifted. Just a flicker. That moment when someone realizes the rope they've been pulling suddenly goes slack. This is a mistake, he said. People don't leave right when their name's starting to circulate. My name's been circulating for years. You just kept deleting the CC line. He looked around, like the walls might back him up. You're angry. No, I said. I'm just done. HR booked my exit interview for the same afternoon. The woman across from me had a clipboard, a soft voice, and the kind of professionally trained detachment that made me want to lie just to see if she'd flinch. So, Jordan, she said. Any feedback you'd like to give about your experience working under Director Langford? I smiled. I could have said 1,000 things. Could have described the meetings he uninvited me from, the client notes he accidentally deleted from the slide deck, the time he scheduled a leadership lunch and told everyone I had a scheduling conflict. When he'd never even asked. Instead, I said, no. I'm sure the results will speak for themselves. She made a note. Didn't press. She knew. Or she would soon. My last day was a Friday. I wore jeans. Packed my things slowly. No one came by my desk except for Tasha, who handed me a coffee and said, "It's gonna get real loud after you leave." I nodded. Good. No big send-off? She asked. No balloons. No cupcakes. No recycled farewell cards signed with fake gratitude. She smirked. Savage. No, I said. Strategic. I walked out alone. No one stopped me. No one called after me. I didn't even badge out, they'd already deactivated my access before lunch. That's what companies do when you stop being useful to the wrong people. But that's the thing about becoming invisible. You learn how to move without being seen. And when you finally step out, they never see you coming back. Chapter 10, The Spiral. It took exactly 9 business days. That's how long it took for the silence I left behind to turn into noise. At first, it was small. Tasha sent me a message on Signal, not Slack, not text. She knew better. Client brief for the Langford rollout came back with red lines. Lots of them. Heard Carla wasn't happy. I didn't reply. A day later, another ping. Your permissions were never replaced. Bryce is scrambling to find the original data structure. I smiled. See, I hadn't sabotaged anything. I didn't delete files or set traps or salt the database. I just didn't leave him a map. He assumed everything I did could be recreated with a quick meeting and a junior analyst. But the truth is, I was the reason the chaos never reached his inbox. I was the one smoothing the edges, closing loops, translating tech into business speak before it made him look out of his depth. And now? There was no buffer. No translator. Just Bryce, and the mess he never realized he couldn't control. I started hearing things from other directions. A recruiter I knew called to say one of their mutual clients had reached out for help. Apparently, the product integration fell apart at the leadership level. Translation: Bryce overpromised, underdelivered, and couldn't explain why. Another ex-coworker forwarded me an internal memo. We appreciate your patience during this transition. We are currently reviewing internal project documentation and restructuring key leadership roles. Restructuring. That word does a lot of heavy lifting in corporate speak. It means someone's about to get walked out quietly. Someone who made just enough noise to get noticed. But not enough to get protected. Tasha confirmed it by week 3. Langford's been pulled from the next rollout. Carla's reviewing email history. It's getting ugly. I didn't ask for details. Because I already knew how it ends when you build your career on other people's work. Eventually, the work leaves. And all that's left is the spotlight. Too bright. Too hot. And aimed at all the wrong things. Chapter 11, Behind Closed Doors. No one announced it. There was no all-hands meeting, no calendar block titled Accountability Review. Just a quiet reshuffling of office traffic, a subtle ripple in the hallway routine. Tasha sent me a one-line message that morning. He just got called upstairs. He, of course, was Bryce. And upstairs meant Carla Denning's office, the glass corner room where only two kinds of conversations happen: promotions and consequences. This wasn't a promotion. From what I heard later, Bryce walked in with a printed copy of a Q3 report and that same self-assured lean he always used to open meetings, like the weight of his own ego could knock a door down. Carla didn't stand. She didn't offer coffee. She just gestured to the chair across from her and opened a folder with a red tab at the top. Inside, a timeline. Email chains. Presentation edits. Slack exports. Version histories. The entire audit trail of a man who had built his title on someone else's work. Mine. At first, Bryce tried to spin it. Said the team was fragmented, that he empowered contributors to work independently, which is why his name appeared on everything. But then she pulled up a draft, one of the originals I'd shared with him, with metadata and timestamps showing he'd replaced the author tag and deleted my notes before uploading the final version to the client portal. She didn't say anything. Just let the silence settle between them like a verdict. Look, he said finally, hands clasped in front of him, we hit the targets, didn't we? The client signed off. That's what matters. No, she said. What matters is integrity. And chain of custody. He didn't have a response for that. Later, someone from HR walked past the elevators and saw him sitting alone in the lobby. No phone. No laptop. Just a man staring at his reflection in the marble floor, finally realizing he might not survive without a mirror to steal from. By the end of the week, his bio was removed from the company site. Official statement? Director Langford has chosen to pursue new opportunities outside the organization. But everyone knew. Because behind closed doors, the truth always finds its voice. Chapter 12, The Receipts. They didn't call me. They didn't have to. I wasn't interested in being a witness, I'd already played that role. Quiet. Convenient. Erasable. But the folder I left behind? That was louder than I ever could have been. See, I didn't just document everything for my own protection. I curated it. Labeled it. Left it where the right people would find it when things went sideways. And they did. Carla's assistant, sharp, organized, probably 3 steps ahead of everyone in that building, found the folder in the shared drive. It was buried beneath a benign label. Client_timeline_archive_final. No drama. No fireworks. Just timestamps, edit trails, call summaries, slide comparisons. Lined up like dominoes. All pointing to the same pattern. I built it. He polished it. He signed it. He took credit. There were Slack messages with him asking me to reword the technicals so they sound more like me. Emails where he forwarded client feedback with good work, but never included me in the response thread. Even calendar invites showing meetings I was mysteriously removed from. After I shared my pre-reads. They had everything. And once they saw it, really saw it, the conversation shifted. From how did this happen? To who else knew? Turns out, I wasn't the only one Bryce had stepped on. There were junior analysts, interns, even a contractor from the DevOps side who'd raised concerns months ago, and been conveniently phased out. The receipts cracked the dam wide open. People started coming forward. Quietly. Carefully. Sharing what they'd buried just to keep their jobs. And once Carla had the full picture, she moved quickly. No debate. No appeals. Bryce didn't even get an exit meeting. Just a message from HR to check his personal items at the front desk. By the time the next company update went out, a new interim director was in place. And every file that used to have his initials in the corner now had space for someone else's. Chapter 13, Collapse. By the time they cleaned up the mess, Bryce was already off the grid. No LinkedIn post. No farewell email. Just gone. HR never used the word fired. They never do. But the whispers said enough. His company laptop was returned blank. Badge access terminated. And his name, once peppered across every project, was quietly scrubbed from internal documentation. The people who used to quote him stopped saying his name. The ones who laughed at his jokes started looking over their shoulders. That's the thing about people like Bryce. Their power only exists as long as no one checks the foundation. And once someone does, the whole thing comes down like it was built on sand. Tasha told me the new interim lead brought in an outside consultant to audit remaining systems. Half the workflows were incomplete. Documents without context. Slide decks without source data. The entire infrastructure had depended on me, on someone who was never supposed to matter. They're still untangling it. Last I heard, they split the project team into 2 groups, salvage and rebuild. And Bryce? He resurfaced 3 weeks later. Someone forwarded me a post from a startup networking forum, a blurry profile photo, half a pitch, and the usual recycled buzzwords. Former Director of Strategic Growth. Looking to partner on next big opportunity. Open to consulting roles. No comments. No likes. Just a post, floating in silence. I didn't reply. Didn't block him either. Let it sit. Let it echo. Because when you build your career off other people's brilliance, you don't just lose your job when they leave. You lose your credibility. And once that's gone, there's nothing left to take. Chapter 14, Redirection. The email came on a Tuesday. Subject line: checking in, potential opportunity? It was from Carla. Polite. Professional. Non-committal on the surface, but I knew the subtext. We're in the process of reevaluating key leadership roles and wanted to touch base. I'd be happy to schedule a conversation if you're open to returning in a senior capacity. That's how they say we chose wrong without actually saying it. I read it twice before closing the tab. No anger. No smugness. Just clarity. By then, I was 3 weeks into something new. A boutique firm. Leaner. Smarter. One where people didn't treat silence as a weakness and team effort actually meant shared credit. I was sleeping again. Eating again. My ideas weren't filtered through someone else's brand of ego. My name was on every proposal I touched, and when I led a project, people knew it. I didn't reply to Carla right away. A part of me wanted to. Not for the job. For the symmetry. For the satisfaction of returning on my terms. But then I remembered the look on Bryce's face in that final meeting, the slow dawning panic of a man who realized he couldn't do what he claimed to. I didn't need to prove anything. The silence I left behind did it for me. A few days later, I wrote back. Appreciate you reaching out. I'm grateful for the experience, but I've found the right fit elsewhere. Wishing you the best with the transition. Jordan Ellis. No bitterness. No grudge. Just a closed loop. Not every return has to be a victory lap. Sometimes the best move is the one they never see you take. Epilogue, credit restored. The panel wasn't huge. Just a regional tech leadership event at a co-working space downtown, open bar, name tags, recycled lanyards. The kind of event you go to for connections, not headlines. I was invited to speak on sustainable growth and client trust. Nothing flashy. Just 30 minutes, a few slides, and an open conda. But when I stepped up to the mic, something shifted. People listened. Not because I shouted. Not because I talked fast or threw around big titles. But because the work stood on its own. Afterward, a few people approached. One mentioned a quote I'd used. Another said my rollout framework sounded familiar, they'd seen a variation of it years ago and didn't know where it originated. I smiled. That was me, I said. And this time, no one questioned it. Then, just before I left, I saw him. Bryce. In the back of the room. Hair shorter. Shirt untucked. No badge. Just standing there, hands in his pockets, pretending not to make eye contact. He didn't approach. Didn't wave. He didn't have to. He heard everything. I walked past him on the way out. He turned slightly, maybe to say something, maybe just to acknowledge what he already knew. But I didn't stop. There was nothing left to say. Because the credit he tried to bury had already found its way home. And this time, it had my name on it.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.